This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on India's nuclear triad INS Arihant. The participants are Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar, Defence Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist.
In a major development, India has announced that its nuclear-powered submarine, the INS Arihant, has been back from a deterrence patrol. Deterrence patrol means that the submarine is now fully operational, capable of taking on any adversary at sea, under sea. Commodore Uday Bhaskar, what does this mean? Can you explain?
The fact that the Prime Minister put out a tweet on Monday acknowledging that the INS Arihant, the SSBN, which is a nuclear-powered submarine that is fitted with a ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead, had completed its first deterrent patrol, is a very significant assertion of India's underwater deterrent capability. Because this particular vessel, the INS Arihant, has been acknowledged as a very, very commendable aspect or commendable feather, I would say, as far as India's Make in India effort is concerned. And just to put it very sort of, I would say, in a nutshell, this is the first time that India has been able to design and build its own nuclear-powered submarine, which means putting a reactor on board, and also have a missile fitted on board, a submarine-launched ballistic missile, which really means that you can fire a ballistic missile from underwater. All of this was done by Indian effort, and yes, there was a fair amount of, I would say, valuable support from Russia that we should acknowledge. But I think what is remarkable is that India was able to design, manufacture, and test it operationally and conduct its first deterrent patrol, all I would say in a relatively short time frame. This is a remarkable achievement, and as I said, the last line I want to add, Ajay, is that a deterrent patrol means that a submarine which is fully loaded has now gone out and carried out whatever operational tasking was given to it. Technically, a nuclear-powered submarine can stay out at sea for an indefinite period. It is the crew stamina that is the ultimate kind of, shall we say, benchmark. And the very fact that Prime Minister Modi has acknowledged this and received the crew at his residence speaks, I think, very highly about the Indian strategic capability. Though it's modest, it's very credible.
How rare is this technology? We've been talking about things and we've been reading in newspapers that only 4 or 5 countries have these technologies of operating SSBNs, which actually means ship submersible ballistic nuclear. In simpler words, nuclear-powered submarine which can also fire a nuclear missile. How many countries have these technologies?
Just 5 countries. It is only what is called as the original nuclear 5 countries who also happen to be the permanent members of the UN Security Council, which is the United States, Russia, which has inherited the former Soviet mantle, UK, which received a lot of support from the USA, France, and finally China. So it's only these 5 countries which have the capability to maintain an SSBN out at sea. And I want to add one more line, if I may, Ajay, which is that India has been able to carry out its first deterrent patrol, as I said, in a matter of about 10 years. If you look at the timelines for the Arihant from the time it was first launched to where we are now. If you look at the Chinese experience, China acquired its nuclear weapon in 1964. China tested its first SLBM, the submarine-launched ballistic missile, in 1974. China carried out its first deterrent patrol in 2015. So there was a fairly large timeline, meaning that it's not an easy task. There are a number of problems, technical and otherwise, that have to be addressed. And yes, China does have a larger submarine fleet than India. I'm not trying to do any bean counting. I'm just trying to draw attention to the texture of the Indian accomplishment. And we did it under adverse global conditions. We were under technological sanctions for a long time. And yet the Indian team, led by the Indian Navy, the DRDO, and the Atomic Energy Commission, and a very, I would say, significant participation by the private sector. Companies like L&T had a very major role to play. I think the whole Arihant is actually a tribute to the perseverance of India, because generally India has not been identified with any breakthrough in the military sector as far as Make in India is concerned. This, I would say, is the exception.
When we talk of this submarine and we talk of the ability to launch a nuclear missile, there is also talk of a second strike ability. In wartime scenarios, where yesterday also we made it clear that we will stick to the no first use policy in terms of nuclear weapons. What does the submarine launched nuclear missile means when it talks about a second strike capability?
First of all, India remains committed to NFU, that is no first use. Now, this was a policy that had been enunciated by Prime Minister Vajpayee in May 1998 when India acquired this capability, and every successive government has reiterated the commitment to NFU. In a way, the Arihant enhances the credibility of the no first use commitment, meaning that in a hypothetical scenario, for instance during the Cold War, it was always a matter of very deep concern that either side could use the nuclear weapon first, either the Americans against the Soviets or the Soviets against the Americans. It could have been a land-based missile, or it could have been a nuclear weapon delivered from a platform in the air, the strategic bombers. So to counter that, technology and strategy moved hand in hand, and the major powers at that time were able to envision a submarine powered by nuclear power that would have a ballistic missile capability wherein the ballistic missile would have a nuclear warhead, and this assured what was called as the second strike capability. So in a way, deterrence became more robust because both sides knew that the other side had the SSBN capability. It is covert because the nuclear submarine is undetectable, unlike the conventional submarine which has to surface for purposes of recharging the battery. So that vulnerability is not there with the nuclear submarine. So the covert, or the fact that you cannot detect it, is a very important characteristic. It can operate from anywhere in the ocean and fire its missile, and the most long range or the most potent of these missiles are what the Americans and the Russians even now have, which are in ranges of 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. So if you can imagine the global map, you can be in any of the oceans of the world and target your adversary. So as I said, the SSBN and the SLBM, the missile on the submarine, in a way imposes peace. It is not a war-fighting inventory item. What it does is to impose deterrence. That is why today India's NFU becomes more credible, because any potential adversary, A, B or C, whoever it is, would be aware of the fact that today the Indian submarine is out there. But let me add, we don't want to overinterpret this capability. This is nascent. We have taken the first step. The first deterrent patrol, formally acknowledged by Prime Minister Modi in November 2018. Just to give an illustration, France carried out its first deterrent patrol in 1972. From 1972 to 2018, in 46 years, France completed 500 operational deterrent patrols to ensure the security of France. So we are at step one, a critical step, an important step. The whole Indian team should be applauded, but there are many milestones that we need to arrive at, including enhancing the number of submarines so that one Arihant cannot give you what is called as continuous at-sea deterrence. It's called CASD in the jargon. We'll get there, but this is the first step.
When you talk of submarine-launched second strike capability, does it mean that the undersea submarine, please explain to our listeners, is not detectable? That is why it is a more potent platform?
Yes. The SLBM and the SSBN, the combination is very, very potent and is deemed to be almost indestructible, undetectable for this very reason, that the submarine as a platform can launch this particular missile while it is underwater. And it's not easy to detect a submarine which does not come to the surface. So what the SSBN does is to identify a launch area, which again need not be pinpointed. And once the target has been identified, it has various options in terms of targeting as to where it can launch that particular missile from. So because of these characteristics, the undetectability, the long range of the missile, the precision, and the command and control that goes with this entire platform, renders it, as I said, almost invulnerable, undetectable, which is how the second strike or the retaliatory aspect is, in a way, buttressed or made more robust, and therefore it ensures that for a country like India, which is committed to no first use, your potential adversary would have to factor this capability in before making any move that could be deemed impulsive or adventurous along the nuclear ladder.
Commodore, you are a former Navy man. Let us get real in number terms. To maintain a continuous deterrence at sea from a submarine, how many nuclear-powered submarines are needed?
Well, let me give you the French example. France currently maintains 4 SSBNs to ensure that it is able to have CASD, which is continuous at-sea deterrence, to maintain or to look after its own strategic concerns. Now remember the geography of France and the politics of France. Today, France does not have any significant adversary. In the Cold War, France had only one adversary to contend with, that was the former Soviet Union. Yet, France found it necessary to have 4 submarines. The Indian case is more complex. our geography is different. We have two different parts of the peninsula. Our neighborhood is very rough, meaning that while France had to deal with one adversary in the Cold War under American leadership, as it were, though it was not formally part of NATO at that time, India is alone. India is dealing with two nuclear-armed neighbors, China and Pakistan. And the complexity for India is that both China and Pakistan are in a very deep, covert, strategic cooperation framework, wherein China has supplied the nuclear weapon and the missile to Pakistan. And Pakistan in turn has used this capability to invest in terrorism, which is why we had Mumbai in 2008. Very soon we'll come up to the 10th anniversary of that. So India needs to acquire a deterrent profile that would address this very complex scenario. And to that extent, I would say that while the Arihant by itself provides only a demonstration of this capability, our geography and our politics would perhaps necessitate something like 5 to 6 boats to ensure CASD or continuous at-sea deterrence in geographical locations that we deem appropriate. And at the moment we are still on the learning curve because we need a missile whose range would be in thousands of kilometers. So we are working on these and hopefully we will get there soon where the efficacy of the missile would also be enhanced in the appropriate manner.
The submarine launch, when we talk about fresh launches and we talk about new submarines, in 1999 India drew up a submarine action plan, a 30-year submarine action plan. Since then only one submarine has been added, the INS Kalvari, which is a conventional diesel-electric powered submarine. We have now told the world that Arihant has been operationally deployed. Though Arihant was on for the past 2 years, public source information was available. How far do you see this plan has faltered? And what will be the number now? And how long do you think the plan will take to fructify?
Well, I'm afraid actually some of the policy decisions taken in the past were not very conducive to enhancing India's overall military capability and the submarine arm in particular. So we have a number of inventory gaps. And you're right, we did have a very, I would say, appropriate, at one level almost ambitious 30-year plan in terms of inducting submarines on one platform almost every 2 to 3 years. That has not happened. Now I think there is renewed focus, and the Indian attempt now is to try and ensure that Mazagon Docks, for instance, would be in a position to build these submarines at the rate that we require. We are talking about 2 years, hopefully. And we also have a tie-up with France to have the Scorpion class and ensure that we can build the conventional class boats in the country. Kalvari is a good example. But at the end of the day, I think the entire Indian ecosystem, it is not just about one shipyard. It is the private-public partnership. It is the Navy. It is every other aspect of the maritime domain that has to deliver so that India's shipbuilding and submarine building capability is also complemented by a very robust design team. So we have made some investments and we hope that the entire ecosystem would be able to deliver in an appropriate way so that the country never faces this kind of a situation again where you do not have a significant induction for almost 20 years. I mean, that is just not acceptable for any navy like that of India, which has the responsibilities that currently devolve upon it.
When we talk of submarines and the action plans and the new build-ups, we are talking of the 30-year plan. Do you think this will fructify in the 30 years from 99, that is 2029, or will it take much longer?
Well, I would say that based on earlier experience, we have not been able to meet our schedules. So there has been a cost and time overrun. And this is where I think the higher defense management of the country, led by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Committee on Security, has to take some very, very rigorous and objective decisions to ensure that major military programs that have a bearing on national security are not delayed or deflected for any reason. And past experience should tell us that any impulsive decisions in terms of closing down or delaying a major induction program would have a very, very negative consequence on India's overall national security, and that should be avoided.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India's nuclear triad, INS Arihant. The participants were Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar, Defence Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, news.air.nic.in. You may email opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.